One of the blessings of employing your students is that they never seem to grow up. Tim's a father and a dynamo and runs a significant part of Hillsdale College, but he's still a kid to me. So I want to start with two facts. They are the signal facts in the change in the American constitutional practices. The first is that we don't make our laws through elected legislators anymore. And that's the worst no-no, that if you just read the Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, all in the first sentence, vests a certain power in a certain body, legislative, executive, and judicial, but only Article 1 says all the legislative power shall be vested in a Congress. But of course, Congress makes a minority of our laws now. And that means that there can be so many of them. Congress actually makes about the same number of laws per year as it made in 1840. And it's still got that stupid, ugly, wonderful process for making them that involves compromise and forever discussion and debate. And the fact that it hamstrings expedition is one of its hallmarks, but not in the bureaucracy. That is complicated, but there are, literally, there are millions of people who work in it, and they work night and day. Well, they don't work very hard, but they work night and day. So that's a change, see. Madison writes, if the laws be so voluminous and changing that it does not matter if they're made by the right process, it's still not law, because you can't keep up with it. And if law, I can tell you from managing a college, the first step in a successful relationship, and we take that step with everybody who enters our college at every level, is they have to adopt the goals. Through an honor code for the students, through a code of commitment for the faculty and the staff. And it's voluntary. There are a lot of places to work. You want to work here. This is what this is for. And that means that we're all on the same page, and we can all help both make and enforce the law. That's the first change. And the second change is it's centralized now. Things are done remotely. And there was a time in American history where that had no prestige. Tocqueville writes that the principles of America as regards administration are each person is the best judge of the matters that concern mainly himself, and similarly, each locality is the best judge of the things that concern mainly itself. And he says that that gives rise to a spirit. And the spirit is that we think that we should run the society, the government. He says the government is bigger in America than in France, the first big nation state, but it's local and voluntary in its nature. If you remove it a distance, then that changes everything. It means that the people who make the law are not near the scene of action. The Constitution of the United States, the effect of it was to centralize power in some ways, but also to complicate the powers so that there could be more elaborate separation of powers. And it was only the national things. And they're in Article 1, Section 8, and they are contained in 16 and 17 paragraphs. And they basically break down into these groups. National defense, which is half of the 16. A national system of commerce. We're all going to trade with each other all we want without boundaries at state borders. And I think previous speaker made the point that the founders were not free traders. They were, kind of, but certainly not purely. And then the third thing is the federal government didn't have any territory, so it needed the right to operate on certain lands where it would have post offices and the nation's capital. And that's the federal government. That's all of it. And that was all of it for the great, for the first 175 years of American history. So if laws are now made by people who do not directly report to us, and they're made in a centralized way, a long way from the scene of action. Last night I gave an example of that. I've become increasingly appalled by the way education works. If you go into that line of work, you learn something about it, and mostly when you look at what's done, you think, well, that's stupid. That could never work, right? Well, since 2000, and this is true, by the way, in red states and blue states, the number of students in the public schools have grown 7.5%, the number of teachers has grown 8.5%, and the number of administrators, mostly in school districts, has grown 92%. And that's horrific, because the nature of the thing, national defense has a nature, and it is, you got to gather yourself up a whacking big old army and resources from all over the country if you're going to fight China, which might be the next thing. And that's its nature. That's what you have to do. But education, it has a nature. And the nature is each person learns. The main work of learning is in the soul of the one who learns, and that's without exception. I mean, there isn't even a moment where that's not true. And so education is decisively a local thing. Also, for young children, college-age children, they're just at that wonderful age where you can just beat the hell out of them, and their parents are nowhere around. But little kids, they have to be cared for by people who make the craziest commitment in the world. If we were bears and had bear cubs, or dogs and we had puppies, we'd be with them a few weeks. No, this is a third of our lives, more we spend on these kids. And they need us, right? And then they need teachers, because it's in the nature of the thing that when you have a question, it's better to get it answered right then. And the process, this is what a seminar is. That's why it's the most glorious way to learn. It's really beautiful. And the reason is, everything that everybody says diverts the discussion to something new. And that means everybody is helping to make the class. So to take the resources and the authority and move them out of the school to a place miles, hundreds of miles often away, and repose them in the hands of people who don't go into classrooms and teach. That's just a devastating thing to do. And there's no example of it in American history until modern times. And it changes things. Now, it unlocked the most wonderful possibilities from a certain point of view. It means that there's this huge bureaucracy. The first big political union is the teachers' union. Started in Michigan, actually. And, we're not universally a blessing to the union. And what is the spirit of those unions? Because, first of all, it's difficult to know what they do, isn't it? What does a district official do in the school system? If you can look it up if you want to, it's not hard. The state budget will always have a list of what the jobs are. And the jobs titles are obscure. So like history teacher, that's not obscure. School principal, that's not obscure. I can't even think of any of the names. They don't appeal to the common sense, but they have words like facilitator and coordinator. And there's scads of them. And they make up more than half the employees of the public schools. And I think that it must be the spirit of them. And the reason I think this, the spirit of them is they have teacher envy. Because a teacher is a highly respected thing. My father was a school teacher in Pocahontas, Arkansas, and he was a highly respected man. And he found his happiness in that little town. And people, when he was dying and died, people lectured me about how important he was, and I had better understood that. And I would say, well, he was my dad. And they'd say, yeah, but you're a big fancy pants academic now. You probably don't understand anymore. So you see, that's where the prestige is. It's just like in the military, by the way. The one who actually holds the gun. I was on the board of the Army War College, and it's for colonels who are hoping to be generals. It's a really cool place. George Washington served in that spot. And I liked all the colonels and some of the generals. Because, there's a filtering process, right? Most of the colonels don't ever get to be generals. And a fair number of the ones who do are good at politics. Whereas anybody who's commanded troops in the field, under fire, it doesn't matter if the chief of staff of the army is in the conversation. That's the person who has prestige. Well, what we've done is we've made the whole thing top-heavy. And the people up at the top are resentful, I think. And that's one reason why they're so loyal to their unions. And that's another reason why, because their jobs are purely a creature of regulation. Whereas, you need school teachers. Somebody's going to have to help the kids learn. If you homeschool, that'll take a lot of time. And parents soon enough are forming co-ops so they can share the load, right? Because it's work, and it's real work, and it's important work. Whereas the district facilitator of whatever the hell they facilitate. Now, the point is, you can take these facts about education that are shocking. Oh, I mentioned last night Sarah Huckabee. I know her dad, and we're from Arkansas, which means we're cousins. And the students at the college have a thing going now that they're demanding that I put together an Arkansas night where the governor and her father the governor and Senator Cotton, a friend of mine, and I are on a panel so they can inquire of us how we are in fact related. It's a story of inbreeding. She, I think she's a ball of fire. Several of these governors are, I'm going to mention them. And she is working. I hear from Senator Cotton, who talks to her, because, cousins in public office. And he said that many in the legislature in Arkansas are looking for a way to curtail the number of people in the bureaucracy in Arkansas. And that's God's work. And I've been doing this a long time. The first movement in that direction that I am seeing in my life of any significance is now. And that's a very hopeful thing. My friend Doug Jeffrey, my longest serving colleague, if you count back in Claremont, John Cervini is the longest serving employee of the college. He thinks I'm an incredible weenie. But I'm just tough enough that he can put up with me. And so he doesn't like all the politicians I like. Whereas I do like all the ones he likes, I think. So I'm going to talk about some governors that are not entirely popular with him, I don't think. But the point I'm going to make is a very important point. And that is, there's a new politics. And it may be too late. It may be. I mean, this is a very bad thing, what's going on here. And it's worth wondering why all this has happened. Because we could be overcome by this stuff now. We could be overcome by it in the intermediate term.